I'm not a writer. I don't have a degree, I don't have a Substack, and I definitely don't have a book deal. I'm just a person who went somewhere I shouldn't have gone, and I lost someone I care about. If you came here for flowery metaphors and clever twists, you won't find them. I'm just going to tell you why my life has gone to shit. If you live anywhere near the northeast coast and you've ever thought about visiting Corvus Vale for urbex content or just for a moody seaside getaway, don't. That's the short version. The long version is why I'm posting. My name is Jenna. I film abandoned places. It started as weekend therapy after a rough patch and turned into a small channel where I climb over fences, whisper "oh my god" at peeling wallpaper, and pretend I know anything about history. I've crawled through burnt-out terraces and drained leisure centres. I've stood on the stage of a murdery-looking social club with a torch between my teeth because I couldn't be bothered to get my tripod. I'm not scared easily, I thought. This one started, like most of them, with a message. A guy I knew from an urbex Facebook group had posted a blurry photo of a lighthouse out in the fog. Someone had written in the comments, "That's in my town, just don't." Which meant, to people like me, please go and make a video. I'd heard of Corvus Vale, but mostly as a joke. A small-ish town dropped into the middle of nowhere. I think it used to be a fishing town. There's a dock, but it just houses flashy speedboats from men going through some sort of midlife crisis now. There's a crescent of grey pebble beach, good for sea glass collecting, a few streets of random shops and a really nice chip van. It seems very vanilla on the outside, although I have heard it hosts a good anime convention. The woods curl behind the whole town like a sleeping animal, essentially blocking it in. There's one road in and out, making the whole place kind of claustrophobic, or cozy, depending on how you look at it. You couldn't pay me to go in those woods. They have their own creepy stories floating about. People say it's pretty in summer if the sun hits right, but every time I've looked it up, it's looked like November. Anyway, there's a bit of lore about the lighthouse. I didn't take it seriously then. I take it seriously now. The story goes that years ago, the harbour master was in debt to something in the sea. People say he made a bargain. He'd lure workers with decent pay and benefits to keep the light going. People that wouldn't be missed. Drifters. Young lads with no family. Women who couldn't say exactly where they were going next. It wasn't a normal job. It's rumoured that once you went out there, you didn't come back off. There's no actual proof, obviously. Apparently this guy was bound to pay tribute, and the tribute was people. That's what they say. I know that sounds like a campfire tale. I would have laughed too. Actually, I did laugh. A little. When I told Sam. Sam is my best friend, and my worst influence. She moved back up north last year, and started coming out with me on my adventures to get out of the house. She's the kind of person who can chat to a stranger like they're already mates, which is useful and also terrifying to watch. If I'm the torch, she's the big stupid grin reflected in the glass. We are polar opposites, and it works great. Worked. We'd both had a rubbish week, and we wanted to get away. Corvus Vale, I said, scrolling through photos on my phone as we sat in a Tesco car park, sharing a meal deal like teenage gremlins. We can get away for a bit, do a video, and I take you to that chip van, because nothing beats it. Jet 2 holiday, she interrupted in her best advert voice, smirking at me from behind her sandwich. Shut up, dickhead, I told her. We cracked up. You had to be there. We set off the next morning, early enough that the roads were empty. The hedgerows were still white with dew. Clouds like damp cotton hung over fields that looked almost foreign without people in them. The last bit of the drive took us through a narrow lane that didn't seem legal for cars. Then the trees opened, and the sea was suddenly there. A long, low line that made my stomach drop in a good way. Corvus Vale didn't look like a real place at first. The town itself is wrapped into a neat little semicircle, the dense woods pressed in close, like they grew tired of standing back and decided to lean in. I counted 3 chip shops, 2 pubs, a charity shop with a single wedding dress in the window, and a post office that had handwritten opening times taped to the door. The woods behind it are... I don't know how to explain it. I remember thinking it was strange that you couldn't see far into them. The trunks were close together, and even though it wasn't summer, the branches knitted like fingers. But if you maneuvered your head just right, you could see a building in there. I saw a peak of a chimney poking out the top of some of the trees. It must be massive. I'm not going to talk about the stories people tell about those woods, because that wasn't why we were there. It's only to say the place has a way of making you feel watched, even in daylight. The lighthouse is set on a narrow, rocky outcrop a little way from the harbour, just far enough that you can't walk to it unless the tide is weirdly low and you're into dying. There's no public ferry. The path that once ran along the rocks is busted in 3 places and signed off with rusted council notice danger boards that look like they're part of the scenery now. The only sensible way is over the water. It took us a minute to figure out how to ask about a boat without saying we were idiots. We strategically asked about the place in 2 shops before going to the harbour. An old woman in a knit hat told us nobody went out there anymore. "Too much bother," she said. And then she said the tide breathes funny out here. I didn't ask what that meant. Another guy in a hoodie shook his head and told us the light's dead, love. Which, obviously. We went down to where the boats were tied up. The harbour is a curved arm of concrete, maybe 50 yards long, with low steps that threaten to break your legs if you don't concentrate. There was a few little boats knocked gently against tyres. Most of them were clearly used every day. Sam found our man. She always does. He was in his 60s, with a face that had been tightened by wind, not surgery, and hands that looked carved from driftwood. There was a tobacco smell around him that made me think of my granddad. He was easing a length of rope into a coil when Sam walked up and said, "Hiya." Stupid question. Do you ever lend out your boat for filming? He gave us a look that went from amused to suspicious in about a second. "Depends who's asking," he said. "We're making a documentary," I said quickly. "I make videos about the coast. We wanted to get some footage of the coastline, just the coastline, the rocks. I've got a GoPro and a couple of vlogging bits. It would be like an hour. We're happy to pay." "Do you know how to sail a boat?" he asked flat. "Yes," I lied. Well, not a complete lie. I'd done a weekend course on the Tyne once when I was 14 for my Duke of Edinburgh award. It was mostly about not hitting things and what to do if you do hit things. I'd never done it in the sea, and definitely not here. £50, Sam blurted out. I looked at her with wide eyes that clearly said, "What the fuck?" She just smiled at me. He squinted past us at the water, like it was going to answer for us. "The tide's funny out here," he said, "and the fog breathes in and out like it forgets itself. You want to be off the water when it turns. You've got, 2 hours tops. You'll get into bother after that." Sam did the thing where she tilts her head and smiles. "We'll be careful. Promise." He hesitated. I could see him weighing up the effort of arguing versus the effort of making sure we didn't kill ourselves. 60, I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Sam raised her eyebrow and pulled out a wad of folded cash from the little pocket in her jacket and handed it over like we'd planned it. "And your name?" she asked. "Martin," he said. He took the notes and tucked it into his wallet without counting it, which made me like him. He stepped into the small motorboat at the edge of the harbour and showed me where things were. Throttle, choke, pull start, fuel shut off, spare tank, kill cord. He repeated 3 times that we should be back before the tide turned proper. I nodded, like a kid getting the keys for the first time. He asked again if I knew what I was doing. I said yes again. I don't think he believed me, but the decision was made. He pushed us off with the heel of his hand, and we bobbed like a duckling that had fallen out of formation. We putted out, me gripping the tiller harder than necessary. Sam sitting on the bow, with her phone poised like a news reporter. The GoPro clamped to a pole so we looked more professional than we were. The cold came up through the floor of the boat and into my bones in a way I didn't expect. "That was easier than I thought it was going to be," she giggled. "Remind me again," she started, raising her voice over the revving engine, hair whipping. "What?" "We live 34 miles inland," she said. "Why did you learn to sail a boat?" "In case I ever needed to dispose of a body," I said, deadpan. She snorted. "You watch too much, Dexter." "Probably." I tried to focus on the feel of the water. Rivers are straightforward. They push you one way. The sea is like being in a crowded room with 100 people moving in different directions. You think you're still, and then you look up, and the horizon has shifted. Out past the mouth of the harbour, the fog changed from a light breath to a wall. It rolled in low, in sheets, and then in ropes. I could see the lighthouse sometimes, then I couldn't. When I could see it, it was a simple white column with a red cap. From far away, it looked almost clean. Up close, it looked like a long bruise. We slowed as we neared the rocks. There's a small jut of stone that rises like a knuckle below the lighthouse. And on that, there's what's left of a dock. 3 posts, 1 ladder, and a grey plank that had seen better days a century ago. I eased us in on the shore side to keep us out of the worst chop. Sam hopped across like she'd done it all her life. I followed, tying us up with a loop that would have made my old instructor squint. We had, as Martin said, about 2 hours to get this done. I kept that in my head like a timer. Sam had the same idea. "We get our shots," she said. "And we don't be stupid." "That's my line," I said. The lighthouse door was unlocked. That surprised me though, I don't know why. There was a heavy metal latch, rusted to an ugly orange, but it wasn't engaged. The door itself weighed more than it looked. It had that damp, swollen feeling like an old paperback that someone dropped in the bath and dried on a radiator. I'd brought 2 torches. One for me, one for Sam. We knew there wasn't going to be power. We clicked them on, and the beams made little cones through the fog that had somehow crept in. The ground floor was a round room with flaking paint and a metal staircase that spiraled up the inside wall like a ribcage. There were hooks where coats had once hung and a metal locker with a warped door that wouldn't close. Someone had scrawled, "Keep out," on the inside of the door in marker, which made me roll my eyes. We did the usual. Close-ups, slow walking, me talking to camera in a whisper like somebody could catch us and tell us off. Which is always silly when the person who would tell you off has been dead for 30 years. Then we climbed. "This is the watch room," I announced to the camera, panning the camera around the room. The ceiling was lower, and a little half window looked out over nothing. The glass was long smashed, and a chilly gust of wind caught me off guard. There was a bed with a narrow metal frame, bolted like everything else, with a thin mattress on it. Somebody had stacked the cushions from the armchair on it, as if weight could make it comfortable. The way you do when you don't have a proper topper. Sam, of course, flopped down on it because she has no self-preservation around textiles. The mattress let out a groan, and the cushions released a plume of dust into the beam of my torch, like a ghost finishing a magic trick. Sam coughed so hard she squeaked. "Gross," she said, half laughing, waving her hand in front of her face. The dust made her eyes water. "Fuck's sake, Sam. I've got asthma," I told her with an exaggerated wheeze, dragging her by her sleeve. There were hooks on the wall loaded with thick woolen coats and waterproofs, and a shelf with an old coffee thermos on it. I thought about the person who had washed that thermos each morning by the little sink, looking out at the same patch of sea until they couldn't tell you what day it was. There's a kind of life that slowly erases you. That's what this room felt like. "I wonder why they didn't take their stuff," I whispered to no one in particular. "'Cause they all died here, didn't they?" Sam said, nodding her head toward the camera, spelling out "get into fucking character" with her eyes. We climbed again. Metal steps, each one ringing a little underfoot, the sound dented by the fog that seemed to press through cracks you couldn't see. At the top, in the lantern room, the glass was fogged on the inside. That felt wrong. I wiped a circle and smeared it, which just made it look worse. The lantern itself was there, the big lens a dead eye. It felt like a museum where the signs had fallen down. I could hear, now and then, a noise like a sigh running along the rail outside. We found a notebook. It had been torn up at most of it, pages ripped, others stuck together with damp and age. We shouldn't have been able to read anything, but there was a blotch, a stain that had soaked through pages and made a brown halo, and in the middle of it there was one word left, faint as if it had given up fighting the rest of the ink. "Closer." "Spooky," Sam said, leaning her chin on my shoulder. That could mean anything. I checked the time. We had, by my mental math, 20 minutes before I wanted to be back on the boat, which would put us back at the harbour, with a smug amount of safety to spare. We did a few last shots of the lantern room, the long slow pans that make people comment, atmospheric and chills below the video. I filmed the broken gauge. I filmed the little brass nameplate that had been polished so much in its life that the letters were soft. "All right, let's go," I said. We went down the stairs, our torches wobbling, our feet trying not to slip on edges that had been worn to a shine. I reached the ground floor door and put my hand on the latch. I was already rehearsing how I'd wave at Martin and say, "You were right," and feel like a responsible adult. I pulled the door open and it was night. I don't mean it was darker than it should have been. I don't mean clouds covered the sun and the fog made it seem late. I mean outside the door was black, like somebody had gone behind the sky and switched it to the other setting. The fog wasn't white anymore. It was grey on black, like smoke above coal. The hairs on my arms prickled so hard it hurt. We weren't that long, I said, like time would be convinced if I said it firmly. The cold came in through the door like a living thing. I shut it. My hand shook enough that the latch clicked weirdly. Sam made a face that was halfway between "this is funny" and "this is stupid." "Okay," she said, "that's a problem." We both checked our phones. No bars, not even a flicker. I moved mine around like a divining rod for a second, then felt ridiculous and put it away. I could taste the fog now. It tasted like old pennies and something sweet that made my tongue curl. It got into my clothes. My torch felt like a candle in a football stadium. "It's fine," Sam said, voice too bright. "She does that. She goes school teacher when she's scared. We'll just wait, sleep a bit, go back at first light. It's not like the boat will float away." We tied it. I looked at the door again, like something in it would change. "Martin said the tide turns funny," I said. "He said we'd get into bother." "We'll not get into bother. We are safe in here," she said. And I hated that she sounded like she was humouring a child, but I needed it. Let's go back up. It's less drafty. We went back up to the lantern room, hoping to any god the guy that lent us the boat would send someone looking. The lighthouse creaked. That's the only word. It creaked like a tree in a gale, and like an old man getting up from a chair. The sounds came from different places each time, sometimes above us, sometimes below. Once it came from the outside rail, and my mouth went dry so fast I almost gagged. Maybe there's a foghorn, Sam said, poking at a lever on the wall near the stairs. If we can get it going, someone might hear. Don't, I said. But I said it too late. She pulled the lever like she'd been waiting her whole life for a dramatic moment. There was a heartbeat of silence, like a sucked breath. The horn sounded. It wasn't a modern sound. It wasn't that neat, low bellow you get now on ships that sounds like something designed on a computer. It was raw. It was a brass instrument being strangled by the sea. It tore itself out of the lighthouse and into the fog, and the fog swallowed it and hurled it back at us from everywhere. It made my teeth hurt. It felt like someone had pressed an invisible hand to the back of my head and pushed. It echoed off nothing and everything. It didn't just ring in the air, it went through us. We clutched each other without looking like children who don't want to admit they're scared. Okay, Sam said over the last shuddering tail of the sound. Maybe don't do that again. Then, the light came on. I didn't know it could. The lantern roared to life. The beam hit the fog and made a white world that moved, and then it swung. It swung like it had always swung, in a long, patient sweep. And with each pass, the fog was cut into layers that made shapes. Shapes. I wish I didn't write that. I wish I could say I was imagining things. But the light made figures in the mist. Not silhouettes you could explain away as rocks or sea spray. They moved wrong, and then too right, like people who'd forgotten how to be bodies and were relearning in front of us. With each pass of the light they crept closer, jittering and jarring, limbs moving all wrong. Sam swore, softly. Shit, turn it off, she said frantically, searching for a switch, a knob, a lever, anything. We tried the same lever she'd pulled for the horn. The horn stayed quiet, thank God, but the light kept on, unbothered. We tried another lever, and a hand wheel that felt like it was welded to the past. The light ignored us. I could feel the heat of it against my face, and it made the fog sweat. We scrambled down again to the living floor, where the little window sat like an eye that had been punched. There was a white feather on the sill. It moved in the draft like a twitching finger. A bird landed on the sill. I swear to you, I know what a gull looks like. I know what a pigeon looks like. I know what a crow looks like. This was a crow, but not black. It was white. Not albino with red eyes. White like someone had dipped a crow in milk and set it to dry. It had a scar on its beak. A little roughness that made it look like it had been welding at some point and didn't much care for PPE. It looked in at us, cocked its head, and cawed once. That sound went through the lighthouse and into my spine. It was like the horn, but small. It echoed down the metal bones. It made the light sweep hitch, just a fraction. I hate that I'm writing this because I know how I sound, but the bird looked at me like it knew what was going to happen. It was aware. It fluffed its feathers, shook itself, and hopped to the side so it could watch the stairs. We both stood very still. There were footsteps below us, not the creaks and groans of old bolts shifting. Footsteps. A set of them, not hurrying, not dragging. They sounded like somebody who was used to the stairs and knew exactly where to put their feet. One step. Pause. Another step. Slow. Methodical. It's just the wind, Sam said very softly. I'm going to go and see if there's a manual kill on the light. Like a breaker. There has to be. Don't, I said. But I couldn't make my mouth say anything sensible. I'd like to tell you I was brave, and I grabbed the thing, and I went with her. I didn't. My legs just stopped belonging to me. She grabbed a wrench from near the door, the kind you use to bully pipework. If I don't find anything, I'll just smack the shit out of it, she said, trying to sound brave. She was shaking, but trying not to. She looked at me like she wanted me to be the sane one, and I failed her. Stay, she said. Call if you see anything. I nodded, useless. She went to the stairs and went up. Her footsteps made their own rhythm, and for a few seconds it covered the other footsteps, and I felt better. Then hers faded as she went higher, and the other steps kept coming. I backed up toward the wall like you'd do in a horror film right before the thing happens. My torch trembled, the beam catching on flakes of paint and making them look like eyes. The white crow watched the stairs with more attention than I've ever given anything. It made a small noise in its throat. I've never heard a crow make a small noise before. I heard Sam above me, metal on metal noises, a swear, a clatter like a panel being opened. Got it, she called, breathless. I think. There's a... Her voice cut off. Not like someone pressed mute, like somebody put a hand over her mouth but through her voice. There was the sound of something struggling, a scuff. The footsteps below sped up. I ran up the stairs after Sam. I yelled her name. I yelled until my throat hurt. There was a sound like metal bending where metal shouldn't bend, and then there was a scream. It wasn't long. That's the thing that replays. It wasn't a cinematic long wail. It was a short, furious, scared sound. It was a human sound. Sam! I screamed, scrambling up the stairs on my hands as my legs were jelly. The light went out. I stopped dead. I couldn't. Fear overtook my body, and I froze. All sound muted. It felt like someone had pressed pause, and even the sound of the crashing waves ceased. I don't know how long I stood there. I think I said no a lot, quietly, like you bargain with a pet that's about to be sick on your carpet. When I could make my legs work, I went up. I kept the torch pointed exactly where my feet were going, terrified I'd see something. Anything other than Sam. The lantern room was empty. The panel near the floor that had looked bolted shut was open now, and the inside of it smelled like hot dust. There was nothing to see. That should have been better. It wasn't. Sam? I said so quietly it would have been impossible for anyone to hear me. I moved the torch slowly across the floor. Nothing. She was gone. I don't remember much after that. I know I touched the lantern glass and it was cold, like it was never on. I remember checking the rails to see if she had gone over. I think I went back down after that. My memory has blanks in it that shouldn't be blanks. I remember the feel of the wrench in my hand because I picked it up even though I didn't know what I thought I would do with it. I remember opening the door to the outside and it wasn't night anymore. The fog was still there but thinner. The boat was still tied where we left it. I untied it with hands that didn't feel like mine, and I climbed in, and I turned the engine over, and I went back, and I didn't look behind me because I couldn't make myself. Martin was there when I came back in. He was smoking. He looked at me, at my face, at the boat without Sam in it, at the time on his battered watch. "Where's your mate?" he asked. Voice very neutral, the way nurses talk when they're trying to get you to say the thing before they go get a doctor. I opened my mouth, and whatever I said wasn't useful. I think I said stairs 3 times. He put a cigarette out on the heel of his boot and helped me tie up like I had never seen a rope before. He put a hand on my shoulder, and it was the first warm thing that had touched me in hours. "Come on," he said, and he took me to the harbour office that had a kettle and a beige phone. I told him everything. The night the lighthouse, the figures, the footsteps. "Sam, you've been gone 46 minutes, Petal," he said with a sigh. "If I'd have known you were going to that damn lighthouse, I wouldn't have given you the boat." I wish I could tell you what happened next was heroic. I wish I could tell you there was a search that filled news bulletins for 3 days, and divers with little lights combed the rocks and found something that could be put in a box and named. I wish I could tell you there was a report with conclusions that felt like anything but paper. The harbour master in Corvus Vale is a different man than the one from the stories. He was kind to me. He took me seriously. He said he believed me. As he listened, he took quick, disapproving glances at Martin, like he was scolding him with his eyes. "I'm sorry this happened to you," he said. "I'll file a report, say she fell overboard." "What?" I exclaimed. "Weren't you listening?" She didn't. "It doesn't matter," he said grimly. "Your friend isn't coming back. It's time you thought of yourself, and this is the only way you'll stay out of Beacon Point." "Beacon what?" "It doesn't matter. Listen. If it makes you feel a bit better, I'll go out myself. I'll have a look around the rocks and see if I can spot anything." "In the lighthouse." "No one's going in that lighthouse," he shot back. He sounded frightened. "Then I'll come back and we can work on something to tell your own authorities when you go home." He said that like they were two different things, his world and ours. They didn't find Sam. Back home, they asked me to come to the station. I made a statement. I made 3 statements. I repeated the route we took. They asked the questions people ask when someone goes missing. Did she argue with you? Did she drink? Did she take anything? Does she swim? I wanted at some point to stand up and walk until my legs fell off. Instead, I signed my name on a line, and the paper took it like that meant anything. I want to tell you I was brave, that I sat there and spilled my guts about the missing time, the footsteps, the light, everything. But I didn't. I lied. I lied to save my own arse because I found out what he meant by Beacon Point. I didn't think anything of it then, but I do now. I think it was a threat. If I opened my mouth and started a proper investigation, he would have me committed. And to be honest, it wouldn't have been hard. Everything I have told you sounds completely batshit crazy. So, I did nothing. And nothing happened. I know what you want from me, if you've read this far. You want the explanation. You want the thing that makes the fog make sense. You want the reason the light came on. You want the rational thing about old capacitors holding charge and currents and unseasonable weather patterns. You want me to say I saw a man, and he pushed her. You want me to say she slipped, and the sea took her, like it takes people every year who aren't paying attention. I can give you some of that. She could have slipped. It is a real possibility. There were wet spots on the metal. She could have put her foot wrong in a place that forgives nobody. But the part I can't get away from is this. When the light came on, the fog moved like people. And somebody walked down those stairs who wasn't my friend. Here is the part I haven't told anyone in real life, because I do want to be taken seriously. And I know this will make some people move me into the unhelpful file. 2 nights after I came home, I woke up because a horn sounded in my dream. It was the same sound, the strangled brass. I sat up in bed with my heart trying to push itself out through my throat. The room was dark. The window was open a crack, because the heating makes me sweat. I got up and shut it, and as I did, something white flashed on the roof opposite, just a bob. A bird taking off. I didn't see it clearly enough to say more. I'm not an expert, I'm not even a good storyteller. I'm just someone who went to make a silly video and came home without my friend. People will tell you the sea doesn't want anything, that it doesn't think. Maybe. The lighthouse did what it always did. It turned and it called. It brought things closer. It took what it was owed, or what it believed it was owed, and we were there, and we were easy. So, if you're an urban explorer, please be smarter than me. Don't go out there. Not to Corvus Vale. Not to that lighthouse. And if you're reading this and you're from Corvus Vale and you know anything I'm asking you, please, even if it's a stupid old story, even if it's just where to take flowers that will mean something, I'll drive back, I'll stand there and feel stupid, and I'll do it gladly. I will go back if someone tells me how to make it right. I'm not brave. I'm not a hero. I just want my friend. I don't know if posting this will help. Maybe someone will say, I know what happened. Maybe someone will tell me a version of events that lets me exhale. Maybe nothing. I want you to be careful out there. If you go to Corvus Vale for chips and a walk and you see the fog roll in where the woods kiss the town and the sea leans in like it's whispering, go home. Don't be brave. Don't be me. If you've got questions, I'll try to answer them. If you want to tell me I did everything wrong, you're probably right. If you want to tell me that I should have gone up those stairs and grabbed her and dragged her down, that you would have, I know. I tell myself that every night. The last thing I'll say is this. If you go to the harbour and you meet a man named Martin, be kind to him. He tried. He didn't have to lend us his boat. He didn't have to believe me. He did. I think he knows more than he says. I think he's doing the maths of his own life, like all of us. And I don't want the sum to crush him. I'm going to hit post now before I delete this in fear of being sectioned or some shit. If you're the kind of person who likes to put pins in maps, don't put one in Corvus Vale. Let it be a blank spot. Let it go back to being a photo you scroll past. Let the light stay off. Let the fog keep what it took. If I hear anything, I'll update. If I don't, please remember her name, Sam Pencott. She was funny and she was kind, and she lay on a disgusting cushion pile bed without thinking because she wanted to make me laugh. And she did. I love you, Sam. I'm sorry.